It's been nearly 4 years. 4 long years of darkness and suffering, but soon, I hope that will all change. The shared nightmare of the worst Battlefield game of all time is nearly over, and we can finally put an end to the trauma that has been Battlefield 2042. With Battlefield 6 nearing a release after, by all metrics, an extremely successful and engaging beta, there's hopeful light at the end of the depressing, long tunnel that has been the FPS space for me personally for a little while now. While there are still some fantastic, engaging, first-person experiences out there like Hell Let Loose, The Finals, or Hunt Showdown, as someone whose favorite FPS series has always been Battlefield by far, it's been a very long time since I've been as hyped as I am for a new entry in the series, so if you feel that way as well and enjoy the video, make sure to like and subscribe as we return to the Battlefield franchise. While there was some hype for 2042 initially with an extremely well executed bait and switch with its reveal trailer, it quickly became apparent just how little of the Battlefield formula and DNA existed within that atrocious game. It had been a while since I'd played it, and certainly not since the Battlefield 6 beta had ended, but seeing the unlockable cosmetics for 6 in the 2042 Battle Pass, I thought, hey, why not take this thing for one last spin and get those unlocks? I didn't even make it more than 2 rounds before re-uninstalling. The game was and will always be absolutely awful. Even after years of updates and content additions, 2042 is just rotten to its core and feels terrible to play even now. Movement remains floaty and buggy, shooting is a disaster with no kinetic feedback or immersion. It really is the worst entry in the series, and I will not stand by and see the narrative shift like it does with every other Battlefield game, where players look back and say, okay, maybe it wasn't that bad. No. 2042 was that bad, if not worse than you remember. None of this is to say that Battlefield 6 is perfect, and I'll get into my cons in a moment, but as an overall package and feeling as a Battlefield game, it's already so far ahead of where 2042 even is now that it's shocking to think this was made by the same studio within the same franchise. Battlefield 6 just feels fantastic in its moment-to-moment gameplay, unbelievable sound design, immersive elements, destruction, and just pure adrenaline-fueled fun. And that's just my experience with the beta alone. From what I've seen of other maps, notably Mirak Valley and of course Operation Firestorm, and the return of Portal in a much more focused and customizable experience, we may be back. And I don't say that lightly given just how much I hate that phrase in general, but more importantly how disappointed I was in the entire series and DICE as a studio with Battlefield 2042. Where that game failed is only in its everything, but most importantly, and what stood out the most to me, was its clear lack of unified vision. It was all over the place in the worst ways, with huge tonal whiplash, a lack of polish across all of its experiences, and the removal of so many basic features that make up a Battlefield game. It's been hashed and rehashed by now, but it's worth pointing out again that the lack of unified vision is most apparent to me with the specialists and how they interacted with the world and with each other. While their inclusion over the standard class system was an absolute disaster, their quips and jokes and cheesy one-liners juxtaposed against the dreary and almost apocalyptic world we were shown in marketing and within the maps was horrible, and completely missed the mark where Battlefield had always stood as a relatively grounded and serious experience, outside of something like Bad Company. But even in that, the multiplayer had a very gritty and mature tone. And even with the removal of the silly quips, still playing as these over-the-top and cartoonish characters with their abilities and superpowers was just ridiculous. DICE's frankly pathetic attempt at an extraction-style shooter with Hazard Zone has to be one of the most bare-bones, rush-out-the-door, hacked-together game modes in Battlefield history, which is sad considering that a mode like this may have even been the foundation of the game itself, before EA and DICE panicked and threw the chopped-up remains into a half-assed attempt at an actual Battlefield game. And while Portal in theory was an incredibly cool and exciting idea, the lack of support and changes to how experience was gained, or just not, completely killed the mode before it even had a chance to realize its potential. Portal also just felt extremely rushed and cheap to me in general, with weapons and animations feeling really half-baked and dated, but all of this is barely scratching the surface in why Battlefield 2042 failed, and you can find many long video essays and reviews detailing the significant flaws in the very foundations of that game. So needless to say, I'm more than happy to see the community put this one behind us and chalking up to a failed experiment or gas leak in DICE Studios or some other factor. Battlefield 6 promises a return to form, which while that was the marketing for 2042 as well, I think we're seeing a level of confidence from EA and DICE that we haven't in a long time, and I'm sucking that hopium down like never before. The numerous Battlefield Labs playtests, the 2 beta weekends, the transparency behind the development, and features of the game, unlike 2042, we're seeing as much gameplay as we want, and whether these are controlled leaks or not, almost no efforts are being made to obfuscate or hide the state of the game. As I said, I'll get into some negatives and gripes I have, but as an overall package, 6 is already vastly superior to 2042, even in its current state. The gunplay and movement feels fantastic, though tweaks have been made to avoid exploitative, Adderall-fueled Call of Duty-esque slides and spamming jumps, which is only a good thing for me, though it remains to be seen how that actually plays out. The sound design is seriously some of their best work yet, and may even beat my previous favorite sound design in the series, which was Battlefield 5. Putting the audio into war tapes, where it might make distant sounds slightly too loud, was incredibly immersive, and unlike 2042 where I literally could have a tank firing behind me and not know it, in 6 you feel the rumble of its tracks near you and the deafening sound of its main cannon firing. Just absolutely awesome. Seriously, running down the street and seeing the rubble and hearing the battle rage around you brought me right back to Battlefield 3's urban combat, and it made me wonder just how much of a shit show Battlefield 2042's development must have been, because it feels like they outsourced the entire game to some remote, inexperienced interns compared to the design and execution of Battlefield 6. Guns feel appropriately punchy and powerful, with LMGs possibly needing a few tweaks. Sniping was satisfying, though I couldn't quite tell if the sweet spot mechanic from Battlefield 1 had returned or not, and if it has, it should just probably be removed, as it just feels out of place in a game like Battlefield 6. The return of Battlefield 5's movement mechanics is very welcome, with diving backwards, different prone positions, crouch sprinting, rolling from falls, all feeling extremely good, helpful, and immersive. I can't really speak for vehicle play with a great deal of confidence, as I focused on playing infantry, but I thought land vehicles felt fine. I know they won't feel as chunky as, say, Battlefield 5's tanks, given modern technology, but I wouldn't have minded a bit more weight and bulk to them. And they may be slightly undertuned with their health and prevalence of launchers through the game, but at the same time I also saw coordinated squads completely pop off in IFVs and tanks, so balance is really hard to say with our limited experience and map pool. From all accounts though, air vehicles don't handle or play great, though I can't speak for that, as my longest life in any air vehicle across all the Battlefield games is about 17 seconds. But hopefully they can return to the Battlefield 3 and 4 model for helicopters and jets, which I think were probably some of the best implemented. Best of all, classes are back in full force, as are generic faceless soldiers once again in standard military gear. It's pretty sad the state of things when this is now a huge selling point, but one only needs to look at the absolute embarrassment that is Call of Duty these days to see how bad it can actually get. While it's not as fully immersive as Battlefield 1, honestly I don't know if they can get back to that. They were cooking something extremely unique, distinct, and iconic with many of those design elements. There's probably nothing that can capture the same feeling as storming a muddy trench in the rain with whistles and screams erupting around you. What remains to be seen, and is a huge contention among fans, is the open versus closed weapons on the classes themselves, or the ability to use any weapon on any class. I myself prefer closed weapons, as I feel it better balances gameplay and gives the classes a more unique role and playstyle. I think a compromise like Battlefield 4's system was probably the best of both worlds though. Each class had its standard exclusive primary, like snipers for recon and personal defense weapons for engineers, while at the same time featuring more universal carbines and shotguns across all classes. This allowed you to play things like assault at longer ranges or an aggressive recon in a way that didn't completely break the class identity and role on the battlefield. I think it's pretty obvious though that Battlefield Studios prefers the open system, with it being the default and likely being the standard game mode across the board, so we may need to rely on portal servers to get our closed weapon experience, unfortunately. With how much Battlefield 6 has nailed right out of the gate, it's not all good news though, and I do have some gripes, with open weapons probably being the first one. I know there's been a lot of debate and argument around the map design and smaller infantry focused experiences of Battlefield 6, but I'm old enough to remember this exact same debate took place around the maps of Battlefield 3. And one of the most beloved infantry maps and experiences in that game was at the time called Nose Hair Canals, and pretty much hated by the community at large initially. I'll be honest though, while I would love to see larger, more epic in scale experiences and maps, it's not really the size so much as how you use it, so much as the general flow and design of the maps that are critical to the experience. Smaller, urban-focused maps have historically been fan favorites across pretty much every entry, where massive open design maps with lots of vehicles, while fun, generally don't seem to resonate as much. People just don't seem to love running endlessly or requiring a vehicle to get into combat, and I can relate to that. If the map flows well and has adequate space for some maneuvering and flanking, I'm good. As some of my favorite maps in the entire series, such as Karkand, Propaganda, Grand Bazaar, and pretty much every Aftermath map have been on the medium to smaller size. While I agree that Battlefield excels at large-scale mixed infantry and vehicle gameplay, that's not to say you necessarily need enormous maps to realize that experience. So while I generally liked the maps featured in the Battlefield 6 beta, I'll say that Empire State is absolutely the worst map in the beta and just a terrible experience all around. While the smaller size is a big factor in that, though calling it a COD map is a hilarious exaggeration, it does lend itself to extremely chaotic, disorganized, and tactical lists thankfulness, which is a word I just made up and I'm going to continue using, gameplay. From what I played, unlike the other Battlefield 6 maps, there's no flow, cohesion, frontline, or order to the chaos of its narrow streets. Especially the middle point just felt like a mass firefight where you could and would get shot from every angle at all times, even when attempting to play slower and more tactically, resulting in that tactical-less gameplay. Though the gunplay and movement were still fresh and fun, I really didn't enjoy my time with Empire State, unfortunately, and I think some major changes could be made to improve its overall flow. Though again, compared to the maps we had in 2042, we are already at a vastly superior experience, as those were a nightmare and just plain unfun to play. They were genuinely just unfinished maps we were playing, hence their reworks, which included adding debris and cover and things like details that would be part of a polishing and final pass during the design phase of a map. So to say we are playing prototypes of maps in 2042 is completely accurate, and the amount of polish, detail, and care put into Battlefield 6 environments already blows them out of the water. However, a much larger issue, and really probably my primary problem with Battlefield 6 in its current state, is the lack of a server browser outside of Portal, or even persistent servers once you're in one. A server browser has so many positives that it's just insane to me that they refuse to implement one like we had in every previous Battlefield other than the awful 2042. And the lack of persistent servers creates a massive disconnect with other players. Why bother attempting to form friendly connections with your squad or rivals on the other side when you are far more likely to never see them again after the current round? Trying to finally take down that skilled pilot in the next round or attack the team that had just stomped you on attack creates an extremely engaging gameplay loop that keeps you coming back for more. Matchmaking into the same map over and over and over, even on the same side, for example playing Breakthrough, you may play 4 to 5 rounds of just defending without ever getting the chance to attack, which is just plain unfun. Think back to the epic clashes of Battlefield 1 where you could successfully defend, then see if you could break through that team you just fought against. Persistent servers would help so much for me, and I still don't fully understand why they can't commit to this in any meaningful way outside of Portal. But weapon customization, soldier dragging, squad reviving, the movement, the destruction, we've got it. Battlefield 6 has an incredibly solid foundation to build upon, and at a fundamental level, I think it captures the chaos and joy of a Battlefield game, with some things that may need to be tweaked or even reworked, like certain map flow. Regardless, I can't believe this long nightmare is almost over. In a way, I wrote off Battlefield as a series despite, and well, because of my love for it, and hatred of seeing the direction it was going, but for once it seems like DICE, aka Battlefield Studios now apparently, actually listened and implemented feedback into the core experience. So I'm going to choose to remain hopeful and hyped because I really want this game to succeed and be an FPS I can jump in and enjoy for years to come. Let me know your thoughts, impressions, and drop your thanks in the comments to the gods above and below for the end of the worst era in this franchise's history.